Coming up on the show today, a new but not new class for Dungeons & Dragons, plus Daggerheart news keeps on coming, and more on today's episode of your favorite tabletop news and discussion show.
Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
It's time for Casual Friday. Here are your hosts. I am Jim. Over there is Brad. You might notice that Ryan's not with us today. What's up, Twin Steel? Welcome. And but we're gonna get into the stuff that we're here to talk about. And the first thing that we're here to talk about is there is new Woot. What's up, Will? First thing we're going to talk about is there's new Unearthed Arcana from Wizards of the Coast. And Brad, is it just me, or have you gotten some kind of whiplash from all the products and UA and everything that have been flying fast and furious?
Well, last week we talked about Daggerheart and how if they're going to be a contender, they need to come out with a bunch of content in addition to their core game. And apparently WotC has realized that's what they need to do too.
Yeah, it seems like with both WotC and Darrington Press, there's a real fear of the community thinking that their products are not supported if there's not something new coming out every 6 weeks. Yes, Twin Steel, we are streaming on all our channels, so you are going to need to resume that habit where you open them all up in different browsers and just mute the two that you don't need. As you just heard, Brad has this open in like 12 browsers on his computer. We're all doing our part to promote the channel. Anyway, let's talk about the Psion, which just dropped a couple of days ago. And let's see, what does it say? The Scions are spellcasters who uses innate mental powers to gain extraordinary abilities and unleash the magic of their minds. Scion in their magic, sometimes called psionics, can trace history back to the appendix of 1E Player's Handbook, and a psionics using class appeared in the Complete Psionics in 1991. Blah, bitty, blah, bitty, blah. Psychic power synonymous with magic, and the magic of the mind flavors numerous spells, like the Cywar's Fighter, etc. This UA provides the Scion with unique twists, spellcasting using psionic energy dice, and the psionic spellcasting feature, carving out a space to make the Scion stand out from its spellcasting peers. Brad, it feels like 2024 compared to 2014, they applied the Battlemaster Fighter superiority die methodology to a few classes in 2024, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the this one has this, whatever they just called the die, I can't remember, the psionic energy die. Didn't a couple other classes get a new die to power their abilities in 2024?
Yeah, I want to say I was actually just trying to pull up D&D Beyond to confirm it, but I want to say the Rogue Soul Knife and the is it Psi Knight? Is that the fighter subclass? The Darth Vader style subclass. I think both of those use the Psi die. So
and also you bring up
the Warrior.
Rogue. The Rogue now has more of a die spend mentality, since you can spend your sneak attack dice to do other stuff, right?
Right.
So you can choose which dice. Interesting. It's just kind of a little bit of a design change. So the Scion gets a D6, super squishy. Their ability's intelligence. And so my initial thoughts, overall my thought was they get lots of cool bonus actions, but they kind of have the 2014 monk problem in that most everything they could do that's cool is a bonus action. So if you play a monk, you don't get to do most of the cool stuff. They improved that in the 2024 monk,
right,
because they made more stuff just trigger on an action too, instead of also costing bonus action. Also, the other overall thought I had, Brad, then I'll let you speak. Ignoring verbal and material components is very, very powerful. It's basically giving the whole class a free subtle spell all the time, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, especially if you've got a decent amount of role play, story driven stuff going on in your campaign. If it's not just a very combat heavy game, because of the whole idea of subtle spelling, casting magic where people can't notice. that definitely has, very effective uses in games that are like subterfuge games or espionage games or investigation games, right? And of course that moment that all the players like to do is, you know, one of the characters signs up for some sort of gambling competition or competitive something or other, and then the other one is subtly helping them cheat by giving them magic boons.
Nice.
Yeah, that it definitely helps in all of those arenas for sure.
Another thing that I've noticed is this telekinetic propel ability is pretty powerful at level 1. So level 1, you can Brad, could you mute your Discord?
Oh yeah, my bad.
At level 1, you can whip people around 30 feet 4 times a day. Uh, no, within 30 feet, then it's 5 times. So it's an average of like you can whip people 15 feet around, which is you get it costs one of your die. You get 4 of those at level 1. That seems pretty powerful for a level 1 feature.
Yeah. The move is random though. You have to spend one of your dice, right? And you roll to see how far you push them. Isn't that how it works?
You roll the die and then you multiply the result by 5. Yeah, and that's how far away. Yeah. So, but later on, it implies you can use it on allies by saying that if you propel someone, you can increase their movement speed by 10 feet. I read that in there somewhere later.
Yeah. Yeah. My overall impression of this is like I really like it. I don't love it.
Hmm.
um, but I think it's good design. The only reason I don't love it is because it is a spellcaster, right? I really wish that WotC could figure out how to make psychic powers different from spellcasting. I wish they had some sort of alternative set of mechanics for psychic powers.
Yeah. Did you look into the MCDM's Mystic very much?
Not the MCDM one. I remember when WotC tried to do a D&D Mystic. They had a UA for the
Oh,
Mystic.
Talent. Sorry,
Oh yeah,
talent. Isn't it called the Talent? Isn't that what MCDM's like
I think
psi class was, the Talent?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Because if I
Um,
remember right, didn't they basically replace spellcasting in the Talent chat? Do you know? I'm not. I just kind of I saw a video or two about the Talent, but I never actually read it.
um, yeah, I don't remember the. I mean, I remember when it came out. I remember looking at it back then, but I never had a player use it.
Hmm.
Um, but you're talking about the MCDM came out with the talent for D&D. You're not talking
Yes.
about the draw steel psychic class that's in their new game.
Right, but what I remember hearing at the time was that the Talent basically replaced spellcasting with a proprietary system that people felt like was a prototype for Draw Steel, and they were like trying it out in D&D first to see if people liked it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, what would make me love this is if they had something other than spellcasting, right?
Hmm.
Um, but since that's what we've got, right? The fact that it uses the energy die, similar to the other psychic classes. Um, it's so there's like consistency in that design, um, and you know it's overall I think it's a well designed class with pretty well designed subclasses. Um, if this was the finished product, I'd have some nitpicks, but I think you know this is the play test, so you expect that, and they'll if they dial it in a little bit more, I think it's going to be a good class. That's just my
Yeah,
general first impression.
there's definitely a lot of places where some things are overly wordy or worded in a very awkward way that you have to read a few times. It's definitely, not completely like copy edited for clarity and stuff. I did see Will from D&D Shorts made a video about the Scion, and I caught a couple minutes of it. And he talked about he didn't like the Psionic attack and defense mode because it makes them feel like they're Pokemon.
Yeah, yeah. Um, they could have better names, but I think they're actually useful abilities. Um, but as far as like overall design, like they're relying on stuff they know works. It's a spellcasting class. They've already used the energy die and other subclasses. Um, you have the what are they called? The
The disciplines
the disciplines, yeah.
that are like Eldritch invocations, basically.
Right, or meta magic,
Yeah.
abilities, right? So it's all design they've used before, but they kind of knit it together in a different way. So it's going to work because we've seen this work with Warlock and Sorcerer. Because it's really relying on the design of those two classes as far as concepts. Um, but they knit it together in a way that it doesn't feel the same, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to feel a little different playing this compared to a sorcerer or warlock. But mechanically, under the hood, it has similar component parts. So it's the design is solid, right?
Phil says that people should check out Drunken Yoda's Psychic. I'm not familiar with that, but thanks for the rec, Phil.
Yeah, drunken.
Um, Brad and I were just talking a couple minutes before we hit record about comparing this and the Artificer, the new UA Artificer, and how it's trending. And that it seems like they're making classes that don't do like groundbreaking stuff, but they are extremely robust and kind of everything classes, which I guess we'll talk about a bit more when we get down to the subclasses, because that's where you get like very, very different flavors. So moving on should we go through the disciplines? The disciplines are all basically spend one of your dice to add or subtract from rolls, essentially. You cast Science Weapon in school. You can gain temporary hit points, biofeedback, destructive thoughts. You can roll your psionic energy die and add damage. So there's a lot of this. Take the influence action. That's interesting because you have the influence action, but then you also have this other one that just says tactical mind. Oh, that's when you take the study action. Okay, interesting. So you can't just add it to any ability check. It has to be those two specific actions.
It makes sense because those are intelligence-based skills, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, the influence action is a charisma-based one, though.
Yes, influence action is for persuasion check, right now?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on these disciplines. Do you have anything to say, Brad?
I think they needed a little bit of work was my first impression, because I feel like the biofeedback, that's the one that gives you the temporary hit points, right?
Yeah.
Because you're pretty squishy, right? You're really built on like a wizard sorcerer chassis. So I feel like the biofeedback one is almost a must take, right? Which is always poor design when you have a list of options and one of them you almost have to take, right?
Yeah.
So it almost seems like maybe the biofeedback ability or some other defensive ability needs to be built into the class, so that this one isn't a required option.
I like that. Do you want to talk about? Oh, there was only one thing. I know we weren't going to talk about the spells because there's a million things to talk about here. But one thing I noticed is that the base class, no healing spells at all until level 9. Not until 9th level, not level 9, but 9th level spells. Isn't that weird? No other healing spells in the base class at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, because one of the subclasses gets some healing spells.
Yeah.
I guess it's for whatever reason they thought the word spells felt psychic. I guess,
Mm, mm.
right?
Okay,
Because
yeah, that's a good argument.
so you
I
got the
buy that.
power word heal, power word kill. Um, so I'm
Yeah.
guessing that's why they ended up on the list. But overall, I thought the spell list is pretty good. Like I was kind of going through it all, and my general takeaway was it's obviously not as comprehensive as the wizard spell list. The wizard still has ridiculous spell selection options, um, like ridiculously good. But I think power wise, this is lands somewhere. I think between like the sorcerer and cleric, like not
Mm.
like it's very I think it's similar in power and utility to the sorcerer. I'd probably say the sorcerer is better. But I would say the Scion is better than the cleric as far as power and utility options. So it lands kind of in the middle of the pack as far as spell usefulness, which makes sense, right? Because you have the disciplines that you can kind of jazz up your spell effects with the disciplines in the same way that sorcerers have meta magic and warlocks have their invocations.
Well, so speaking of jazzing things up and personalizing it, let's talk about the Scion subclasses because these are all pretty different from each other, except for one that I don't get. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But so the metamorph says your mastery of psionic powers turns inward. Your own flesh becomes like clay to you, and you mold it to turn into the perfect vessel of your psionic powers. Experience in manipulating your life energy also enables you to adjust the life force of friends and foes alike. As I was reading this, my first thought was the T1000 because you can just turn your arms into blades. T1000 from Terminator 2. If you're not an old person like me and you don't get that reference. And Brad said, "What did you say? Venom?"
Venom, yep.
Yeah.
I think you or Carnage, either one, like this, the whole symbiont thing, right? The other thing I thought of is this would be a really cool way if you wanted to play a mind flare. You could reflavor all this like reaching and grabbing like tendril kind of things as your mind flare tentacles.
Hmm.
Um, so I think you could reflavor this to play some sort of like bizarre aberration like character like a mind flare or some other
Absolutely.
weird like tentacled eldritch horror like thing.
So this one, the Bone Blade, Flesh Maul, and then there's a ranged one called the Viscera Launcher, which is a dope name. That's a good name. It would be a good name for like a real hardcore band. Visceral Launcher. Hello, Cleveland. We are Visceral Launcher. So that's the ranged attack. And none of these are exceptionally powerful, but they're all pretty cool. And at level 6, you get extra attack. And then this is, oddly, this is the one with all the healing, right? I don't think, or does the Psy Warper get healing too? But yeah, this grotesque T1000 Carnage Venom symbiote thing is the one that has cure wounds and mass cure wounds.
Yeah, I mean you could flavor that in weird ways, like like you're patching up somebody's wound by putting some sort of like you know symbiote like creature like this like tendril kind of like slug like thing onto somebody's wound, and it you know um eats up the dead flesh and pulls the wound closed with its like spidery like legs or whatever.
That's dope. This subclass gets quickened healing, which you can cast Cure Wounds as a bonus action. Oh, look, another really cool thing you can do with your bonus action with the class that you probably won't get to do because you have like 3 things that are way more efficient to do with your bonus action on your turn. Um, yeah, I'm kind of tired of the action bonus action 5e economy.
Yeah.
I'm kind of over it.
And our next one here is the Psy Warper. I think that name needs to change because isn't the fighter subclass the Psy Warrior? Isn't that what the fighter subclass is called? So you have
uh,
the Rogue Soul Knife, and isn't the fighter one the Psy Warrior?
Yeah, new multi-class option, the Cywarpier. And this one just seems like it's mostly moving stuff around. Because you get a lot of movement stuff, Featherfall, Misty Step. haste, dimension door, and what cool bonus action things can this do? Misty Step without expending a spell slot once per. Oh, you can just use your psionic energy die. No action required.
Yeah,
Um,
they could just call this one Nightcrawler, right? This is the teleportation character, right?
yeah,
Yeah, you're just
yeah.
like you got Blink and Misty Step, and you got a mass teleportation at level 14, teleportation at level 3. Yeah, you're definitely the teleporter. This one, I think, would be kind of a fun rival to the Warlock, the new Fey Patron Warlock, right?
Ah.
That's also a teleporter class.
Mm-hmm. Then next we have the Psykinetic, and this is the one I don't get. Like, I don't. It says the Psykinetic controls their psionic powers like a malleable force. They bend their telekinetic energies into sturdy barriers and strike with the force of a battering ram. And like, I don't really get the flavor.
This is like your Jean Grey or Violet from The Incredibles, right? So this is your like force field maker, push shove kind of telekinesis character.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe a little bit of Eleven from Stranger Things, right?
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. I mean, I believe it when you say it, Brad, but I don't see it.
At least I think that's
Um,
what they were going for. I don't think the spells fit that. Like I don't know,
yeah.
like I guess Cloud of Daggers would be like you're just like picking up shards of stuff around the room and throwing it around, right? I guess you have to stretch your imagination a little bit for that. But Telekinetic Crush, yeah, Resilient Sphere. I don't know how Stone Shape fits in. Wall of Force makes sense, right?
Okay.
Um, so that's that, that has that like force field. Oh, the other force field character is Invisible Woman, right, from Fantastic Four.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with the new movie coming out, they should definitely lean into that. Like when they tweak these for publication,
Yeah.
whatever Invisible Woman does in the new movie, if that new movie is successful, they need to add that to the subclass because everybody's going to want to, be Invisible Woman.
And finally, we have the telepath, which is pretty much exactly what you think it is. They've got a bunch of kind of bard spells, but they do get counterspell. I don't think any of the other subclasses get counterspell.
Yeah, I think one of them got Dispel Magic, but yeah, I think this is only one that gets Counterspell.
Yeah, and their ability, I think it's high level, but oh yeah, this is pretty cool. Being able to expand the range of confusion and calling it scramble minds is it's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a Professor X kind of thing, right? It's like everybody in the room is, you know, dazed and confused as Professor X just wheels his chair around, you know,
Yeah.
so he can monologue.
All right. So anything else you want to say about the Psion?
I think it's a solid start. Like I said, I think it needs to get tuned up a little bit. Change some wording, clean up a few abilities. Really figure out what to do with bonus action, so it's not quite so scattered. But yeah, like I mean, if this was published as is, I wouldn't hate it. Um, but the fact that I think it's good enough as it is that I think whatever the published version is going to be solid. Um, you know, in my heart of hearts, I want a class that just does something other than spellcasting. But maybe Wizards will finally figure that out by 6th edition, right?
We can only hope. One thing I do like, I always point this out, is that I like any ability that lets you spend hit dice. People need more things to spend hit dice on, especially now that you get in 2024, you get twice as many. They doubled your hit dice, right? Because you get them all back on a long rest instead of only half.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that because it gives you that flavor of like you're expending your life force to use your and of course you're going to describe that as having a bloody nose while you're like forcing extra your hit dice into your psychic powers, right?
So next up, we are going to talk about a Kickstarter that's coming toward you, the City of the Black Rose. And let me hit play here and mute this. So, all right. So that person on the screen right there is Jeremy Cobb from Three Black Halflings. And they are three, if you don't know, Three Black Halflings, it's Jasper William Cartwright, who you might have seen on Dimension 20, and I'm pretty sure he's done some Critical Role stuff too. Jeremy Cobb, and there's a couple other people who are sort of kind of involved. I don't listen to their podcast a whole lot, but they've made this setting. You see right there, it says Noir setting for D&D 5e Daggerheart and any fantasy RPG. And so this is a Kickstarter. The setting is like 1920s newsy noir with steampunky kind of stuff, World's Fair, World Expo kind of vibe. But what I think is pretty interesting about this is that it's a 5e setting. So let me find some of the pictures where they show you like what's in there. Like, okay, this is a great example. So they're showing you it's not going to have keyed rooms, and probably it's not going to have stats. So they're clearly going system agnostic here. But they're not just going system agnostic. They also include a campaign frame for Daggerheart, which I think is really interesting. Because if you make, this is what Daggerheart campaign frames look like. They've only included the first page, which tells you, which is like the part you give to the players anyway. And I think this is really interesting because if you go to the trouble of making a fantasy setting, mostly for 5e, but it says, any setting, it's really not much more work to include a Daggerheart campaign frame. Because a Daggerheart campaign frame is mostly like a gazetteer. It's mostly like a setting book. Where what you do with a campaign frame is you establish the world, which they've already done that in the book. They've already established the Black Rose world, but the campaign frame then gives you specific guidance for how to customize Daggerheart's vanilla options for this world. The same way that like Dragonlance and Dragonlance halflings are Kender, right? So it's basically the same thing. So they give you, if you're going to play this class, you'll probably be from this city, etc. If you're this ancestry, you might feel this way about these other people, that kind of stuff. But it's interesting here because I think this is pretty smart. Because if Daggerheart takes off, then they're going to be like the first third-party campaign frame for it. And if Daggerheart flops, then they didn't really do a whole lot of extra work to make this happen.
That's a solid point. Yeah. And it seems to me, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm working on an adventure outline, and I was like, if I publish this, it would just make sense to include, because it's not that much extra work if you're going to publish an adventure to do a 5.5 version and a Shadow Dark version, right? And then, it wouldn't take much more to add a Daggerheart campaign frame and a 5-act structure like the Daggerheart adventure module, right? So I feel like design-wise, that might be kind of a clever way to market your product, that you can write it up as a 5.5 version, a Shadow Dark version, and a Daggerheart version.
Yeah, and as long as you're not using anything that would prevent you from publishing it, on any of the other avenues. Daggerheart has their own SRD, and 5.5 has their own SRD. But I'm going to watch this one very curiously to see how well it does and to see if this becomes a trend. Because when people always talk about D&D killers. I put out a video about Daggerheart this week, and the title was D&D clone or D&D killer, and it's neither. You have to put the word D&D in a video title to get clicks. But people got really, really mad talking, that I called it a D&D killer. I didn't, but just having the word indie killer and the Daggerheart logo together makes people mad. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it it's obvious from YouTube comments that a lot of comments are on your thumbnail. Like they're making comments about your thumbnail before they've even watched the video. I think
yeah,
that's I, I got like 20-25% of comments seem like they're more a response to your thumbnail than it is to whatever you're actually saying in the video.
yeah. I don't remember the point I was trying to make before that, but
You're talking about
uh,
Daggerheart as its own game. It's not a clone. It's not a killer.
Twin Steel, the frame and the setting are the same thing. It's just what Daggerheart calls it. Yeah, could cite both SRDs in a single book. I well, guess not. I mean, I ain't a lawyer, so don't listen to a word I say about anything. So I don't know, but
Well,
I don't
my
know.
thought was like once you have the bulk of your adventure content, you could have like 3 different PDFs, right? So the person, like, if they're purchasing it on like not DM's Guild because you couldn't do Shadow Dark on DM's Guild, but on like Drive-Thru, right? So if you're selling it on Drive-Thru, you have your art, you have your pitch, all that sort of stuff, and then when they go to purchase it, they can download the 5.5 version, or they can download the Shadow Dark version or the Daggerheart version. It just would be 3 different documents, and
Exactly.
those documents would be largely be the same text, right?
Mm.
It's just you're just altering stat blocks for Shadow Dark, and you're adding the gazetteer frame for Daggerheart.
And I remember now why I was going to talk about D&D killers, because I don't think there is going to be a D&D killer. Shadow Dark is great, and a lot of people really love it. Is it going to become a household name? No, absolutely not. Daggerheart's not going to become a household name. You're not going to be able to buy a Shadow Dark waffle maker anytime in the next several years. It's just not going to happen. But I think that the future, the brilliant, beautiful future that we should be hoping for, is that more designers will follow this kind of three black halflings lead and do multi-platform products. That instead of just designing for 5e, that these other games are popular enough that we can get more system agnostic, more multi-platform, more things that are easily to be adapted from one game to another, instead of siloing all of your products. Because who knows, Shadow Dark might rise up, Daggerheart might rise up, MCDM, DC20. If you're a designer and you're looking to attach your wagon to the next hot thing, who knows? Who knows
Yeah.
what that could be? So
Yeah. Well, and I pay attention to the wargaming side of the hobby, and trends in wargaming are usually about 10 years ahead of trends in RPGs.
mm,
Um, so I think there's a lot of times you can see what's going on in wargaming now and kind of use that to predict what's going to come to RPGs. And one of the things that's like really popular in the wargaming space are miniatures agnostic games. So you can just you can publish your own miniature agnostic games, and people can use whatever miniatures they have on their shelf, to play that game. Like I mentioned last week, I just started playing Song of Blades and Heroes with my youngest son, and I'm using all of my D&D miniatures to play that game, right? Because I already have a ton of D&D miniatures. So I think if RPGs follow that same kind of trend, indie developers making miniature agnostic games, because that's like the new hotness in wargaming right now. I think we could see a version of that for TTRPGs, like you just said, where you have a lot of system agnostic products for RPGs.
yeah, let's hope so. Mr. Vincent, are there people who wish for a game to kill D&D? Absolutely. There are people out there whose entire personality is wishing for D&D and Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro's simultaneous demise. And yes. Okay, so moving on. Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, the next thing that we're going to talk about is there's a new product coming out. This is one of those things that was announced, and I knew about it, then I forgot about it, then it was referenced again a few months ago, and I remembered, then I forgot about it, and I completely forgot about this again until like 3 days ago when this article came out. Dragon Delves is coming out July 8th. It's 10 adventures for levels 1 through 12 and written for 5th edition, 2024 5th edition. It's you can pre-order it. It's $60 for the print and digital bundle. And there's some interesting things about this are the what does it say? Oh yeah, each adventure has new DM guidance, which is a refreshing change of pace. Also, where did it say that? Oh yeah, multiple options to help DMs link adventures together to form a full campaign. I like this. When we were watching all the playtest UA last year, it seemed like that WotC was intentionally screwing over dungeon masters by giving players things to do that would take away dungeon master agency, and we were thinking, oh no, they're going to drive all the DMs away from this game. But something like this is a step in the right direction. I don't know if I'm a new dungeon master, if I'm going to be attracted naturally to a dragon anthology book.
Right.
But it's good that it's there. What do you think, Brad?
100% agree. I think, they need to deliver on those two, promises right there, that they're going to give DMs better advice. They're going to give DMs more tools, helping you, connect, these individual adventures into a campaign. Because if there's advice on how to do that here, once you learn that, you can extrapolate that out, right? Because that's how I run games. I often mix and match a bunch of old school D&D modules with with one of the more modern campaigns. I combined a lot of different adventures together to make a sandbox usually. So if you start teaching DMs those kind of skills, right, you're going to create better, more versatile DMs that are going to be resilient, and that's what you need. You need resilient DMs who are going to be able to run solid games and not get burned out on dealing with problem players or dealing with system bloat and all those things that get under game master's skin.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I do like this art.
And that was one of the things I remember when they first teased this, is that they were intentionally going different directions with the art. They didn't want to just go with the standard, this is what a green dragon and D&D looks like, right? They wanted to mix it up, have some different art styles. And I think that's a fun choice.
Each chapter also kicks off the history of the art of that particular dragon through the annals of D&D history. Crap, I might have to buy this book. They're kind of hooking me. I mean, I'm not really that interested in 2024 D&D books, but this one sounds pretty good.
Well, like we talked about last week, D&D is really two separate mechanical systems, right? You have the DM side and the player side. So you could take the DM half of this, which is mostly what adventures are, is all the DM bits, and you could run this with the 2014 rules if that's what you're used to playing, and that's what you have players who are already playing 2014. You can definitely run this with 2014 player characters.
Yeah, or Shadow Dark, or Daggerheart.
Yep.
Or whatever you want.
Well, and back to our point about people hoping for a D&D killer, and Mr. Vincent in the comments saying they're idiots. It's D&D is necessary for the hobby, right? D&D draws people into the hobby. We know that with every edition change, the OSR games grow, right? All the OSR experts will tell you that whenever D&D changes editions, the OSR community grows. People jump ship from D&D into Old School Essentials or Shadow Dark or whatever. That's just historically how it's always been. Or people go back to play previous editions after having played whatever the new version of D&D is. And D&D just it carries the weight of the hobby. And D&D is like the gateway drug for TTRPGs. You get people hooked with D&D because it's the brand recognition. Like, people know what D&D is, and people who are playing OSR or Shadow Dark or Homebrew, whatever, they still call it D&D night most of the time, right? So it's overall, I think it's healthy for the community if WotC and Dungeons and Dragons proper are successful. Because all the other games out there that we wish people would play more of are going to be more successful if D&D is successful, because eventually those new D&D players are going to migrate over to these other games.
Eventually, they are going to migrate over to the other games. So moving right along is the next thing we are going to talk about. I don't have a graphic for this, but a few days ago I got an email from the good people at Darrington Press that they said that they had sold out of their core edition and maybe also their limited edition of Daggerheart.
Wow.
But they said you could still get it on Amazon, and they said that there are lots of friendly local game stores that still had it. But I mean, I don't know if that's impressive or not, because we have no idea how much they could be horribly bad at ordering stock. So it's not an impressive stat necessarily. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was this week, starting last night, they launched their 8-part miniseries actual play, The Age of Umbra. And I caught about an hour of it this morning. I didn't get to see any I didn't get to see any combat, but the beginning was pretty intense. But the reason why I find this notable is which Daggerheart campaign frame they choose to spotlight first. Because there's several Daggerheart campaign frames that we've talked about in the short. There's the Withering. The first one is like just kind of a standard fantasy. There's a political multiple one called Five Banners Burning. That's exactly what you think about. It's just Game of Thrones on the battlefield. There's Beast Feast, which is super silly, where your weapons are things like pot lids and spatulas, and you go fight monsters and get them to drop loot as ingredients so that you can make stuff. So there's this huge, and then there's the Motherboard one that's like a post-apoc dystopian. Age of the Colossus as a giant monster hunter one. Like, the campaign frames are really varied and wide and cover a huge range of genres, which I've already talked about how smart that is.
That's brilliant.
So it's not just pigeonholed as a high fantasy game or but choosing Age of Umbra, which is inspired by Dark Souls, Elden Ring, very grim, very dark. Like, even the set on the actual play is very dark. Everyone's shrouded in shadows. And what's so amazing to me about that is that I've seen, this is like the second time this week that I've seen, I feel like the people at Darrington Press are really, really smart. And they look at the internet and they know what people are saying about their game before it comes out. Like with, there are people who are saying Daggerheart's going to be one and done. They're going to drop this rulebook, then they're going to move on to their next crappy product. So what did Darrington Press do? The day after the release, they came out with UA for a new class to say, hey, look, we see you talking on the internet. We're not one and done. And then, there's also people out there on the internet who say, well, if Critical Role made a role-playing game, it must be for theater kids whose PCs want to sit around and talk about their feelings. Right? So what do? Their first actual play is Age of Umbra, which is a super dark, super gritty, deadly, very extra lethal, combat heavy campaign.
Right.
I just think that Darrington Press is doing it right,
Yeah, there's a lot of things they're doing right. The fact that it's they've got a free adventure out there to play. You can download the core rules for free, right? There's like the playtest sample pack out there.
Mm.
You know, they've got a dedicated website. They've got a character builder already. You know, they've got a bunch of component parts out there that make it fairly easy to get into this game. I think it's a really smart way to you know, to build a community. You know, I'm hoping it works. I want to see them be very successful, because I want our community to get to the point where, you know, people aren't married to one game, you know, for, you know, their whole role-playing career.
Right. And Mike, you're 100% right here. It's just time will tell.
Yeah.
Time will tell if enough people like the game that there is a good player base. All right, so moving on. Hey, did you know that Brad and I are part of a trio of people that are called the Landlocked Warlocks? If you're watching this on the screen right now, you might see these little weird devilish LWs in the corners. Well, that's the name of our little consortium. And Brad came up with a name. He's a very clever guy. And so the Landlocked Warlocks have our own YouTube channel. And if you want to go watch us on the YouTube channel and go in the main place where everyone's chatting together, you could do that at Landlocked Warlocks. Once you're there, you should also subscribe. And now we come to the part of the show we call the catch up, where we just catch up. Brad, what you got going on?
Well, I just want to tell because I love this story. I want to tell the Landlocked Warlock story.
Please.
When Ryan and Jim suggested the idea of us doing a collaborative channel where we would move the, you know, main podcast to and do actual plays and all that other stuff. Yes, definitely hit the like button, and subscribe, and all that cool stuff. I was relaxing by a pool in Mexico on vacation, and I had, like, you know, a few drinks in me, and I was like feeling super creative and recharging my batteries. And they're like, well, what would we call it? And I got on a roll, and I rattled off like 20 different names. You know, I had that spark of inspiration, and there were a lot of great names in there. But in the middle of that, like you do as a DM, you throw in that one weird NPC, and you got all these cool NPCs, but your players love the weird, goofy one that you came up at the last minute. Yeah, that's Landlocked Warlocks.
Yep. And yeah, both Ryan and I agreed. As soon as we saw that, we were like, oh, we can stop talking. We can say less, fam. That's the one we need.
I was like, no, that's the silly one. That was a joke. Look at all the other cool names I came up with, none of which I remember now. So apparently Landlocked Warlocks was the right choice.
What's your most recent or your next video, Brad?
Oh gosh, I'm in that weird spot where you get in as a creator where I've got like 3 unfinished videos and not really sure which one is going to be the next one to get out. So I've got one I'm doing on alignment, where I take sample characters from the Andor TV show. That's probably going to be the next one to come out. I've got like 3 videos that are half finished. I'm kind of like stymied right now. I need to get my ass to work.
Gotcha. Well, I have a video coming out on Sunday, June 1st, about death moves in Daggerheart. And Twin Steel, you'll be happy to know that I discussed multiple homebrews for Daggerheart and 5e. So so you can add it to that playlist or whatever you were talking about. Anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna be doing Daggerheart stuff for a while, for a few weeks for sure.
I also
go ahead. Sorry.
I also got a cool new book called The Sickest Witch. It's an adventure from Morkborg. One of my players bought it for me. He like showed it to me. I'm like, oh, cool, you're gonna DM. He's like, no, I bought it for you. It's a gift for you. So he wants me to run this.
A lot of strings on that gift.
Yeah, no doubt, right? He picked it up at a swag table at the Maryland Death Fest. So he was at this metal festival, and there was a guy there selling RPG products. And this is The Sickest Witch. It's a very dark. It has a like the first page is a very big disclaimer about this is horror. People might get offended. Be careful. Kind of disclaimer at the front of the book. And it's apparently this adventure is a prequel to another adventure this guy wrote, Beneath the Inverted Church. And apparently, I think the name of his publishing is called Severed. But it's compatible with Morporg. It just looks cool, like a cool dark fantasy adventure. But that's the other thing that's on my reading table right now.
Nice.
Oh, and it came with wooden miniatures. This is like a little box like you would buy like playing cards in. I haven't opened it yet, but they're little like wood. It says they're wooden miniature figures for the game.
Huh.
So
interesting.
Yeah. You got to figure out what those are all about.
Yeah, in just a couple of minutes, I'm gonna give a preview of my Death Moves video on Sunday, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about how Death moves in Daggerheart. I'm gonna continue my segments of Jim explains how Daggerheart works. I don't have graphic for that. I messed up on that one. But so moving on, Brad and I are properly caught up now. So we are going to move on to our roundtable discussion where we're going to talk about incorporating PC backstories into campaigns. Now, this was Brad's idea for a topic. Brad, do you want to launch into... You want to get started?
Yeah, well, so like this is something that everybody like suggests, right? Like you want to get your players more engaged, find a way to include their characters into the narrative, right? Find a way to include their backstory. You also see, angry players online complaining, I wrote this 5-page backstory and my DM hasn't used any of it. So there, I think there's a sweet spot with including players' backstories and getting your players more engaged. I think that is good advice. But I think you have to make it work. The best way I know to make it work is to keep it simple, right? Don't ask your players for 3-paragraph backstory or 3-page backstories. Find like one simple way, and you can mix it up different campaigns. Find one simple way to invite your players to include their backstory. And of course, if you do that, if you invite them to do that, then you actually have to include their backstory. But a couple of ways that I know of to simply include a backstory is one way is to look at alignment, right? What is the character's alignment? Okay, you're chaotic good. What does chaotic mean to your character? Is it freedom? Is it independence? Is it, subverting, the status quo? What does chaos mean to your character? So they're chaotic good. Well, what does good mean to your character? Now, starting off at level 1, right? Are you more chaos or are you more good? And can we make a story arc where you go from chaos to good, or maybe you go from good to chaos back to good, right? So you can actually just play with the 2 words of that alignment, and you can kind of create these 2 sides of the character, and you can create a story arc, for that character around those alignment ideas.
That's really interesting. Do you have any experience with Year Zero, or what's the quiet one? The Quiet World, Quiet Place? That's the movie. There's Year Zero, and there's another one that's pretty popular for it's like a group world building game. Okay, chat. What's the other one besides Year Zero?
I've only heard of Year Zero. I don't have any experience with it.
I think it's called the Quiet Year, something. I don't know. The guys from Bim Bam used it to build one of their campaign worlds a few years ago. I remember. So you can incorporating PC backstories. You can if you're lucky enough to be able to do it like from the ground up. If you can the Quiet Year, yeah, Roth, I was thinking that, but I was like they both have the word year in them, so the Quiet Year didn't sound right. But I think you're right. The Quiet Year. If you can if you can start with the PC's backstories and then build the world from that, that's more of that kind of year zero, quiet year, like communal storytelling. But more likely, what's going to happen is especially in D&D is you're going to have a world and you're going to have factions and you're going to have NPCs, and then a player is going to come in with their backstory and say, I'm the long lost son of Count Rugendugan, and then you go, okay, well, this NPC over here who was Count Schmurfenblurfen is now Count Rugendugan, so that I can introduce him, right?
Yeah.
That's just how you do it. You just go in and say, okay, well, these are this backstory element. This PC has these backstory elements, so these are the kinds of things thematically that are important to them. And then you can mold your world into those things. Like you adapt your world to fit the backstories. But Brad, you were saying a few minutes ago with the player saying, I wrote a 5-page backstory and the DM hasn't included any of it. And I feel that pain because I've gotten that 5-page backstory before, that has 12 NPCs and 6 locations and 9 different events. And I'm like, I don't know, if we play a 5-year campaign, I can work all this in. But, we're going to play for a couple months. I don't have time to introduce all 12 of your cousins into the
Right.
story.
Yeah, and that's why I say keep it simple, because especially if you're going to try to do it for all the players, right? That's why I like the alignment thing, right? So like you just kind of have this attitude. This character is going to start off with kind of a chaotic, focusing on his chaotic side of his alignment, or focusing on the evil side of his alignment, and then he's going to transition to the more neutral side of his alignment, right? Or the transition to the good side of it. Like so you kind of just have a tone that you're going for with a story arc. And then you can kind of, and if you and the player are both mindful of that alignment and that kind of transition that you're going for, that character development that you're going for, you can just use that as a theme and kind of talk about it between sessions. Another way to do it is just have each player make one NPC, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and then you tell your players, hey, when your NPC, the one you created, is in a scene, that's your chance to play up your backstory, right? And then and then as a DM, all you have to do is juggle these 5 NPCs for your 5 players and find ways to keep bringing those NPCs back, whether they're part of a enemy faction or they're in a particular town or whatever.
I think it's the one thing. The rogue class in Daggerheart has 2 subclasses, and the one's called, I don't remember what the name of one is, but it's like your standard sneaky rogue. And then the other one is called the Syndicate Rogue. And the Syndicate Rogue is really interesting because it's all about having criminal contacts. Your all your subclass is about being able to know and even define an NPC that you have, like, we go to this place, I know this person, he's one town over. And so that's kind of interesting that it's like if you're that kind of player that like you need to contribute to the narrative, you need to collaborate to feel invested. It's like they've made a subclass for you. Like if you're super like powered by the apocalypse, I want to come up with the name of the tavern, I want to come up with the name of that NPC. Like they siloed that player into that class. So that was maybe smart. We'll see.
Yeah, I think a good backstory is like 3, maybe 5 bullet points. They don't even have to be full sentences. Like just enough, like maybe answer the question of why did you become an adventurer, right? And then give me like a conflict. What is your conflict? Whether it's an internal conflict or external conflict. Give me one conflict that your character is going to explore, and then give me one location or one NPC that I can weave into the world. Like there you go, 3 bullet points, boom.
Yeah, 100%. I like to see what makes me happy as a DM is when I get open-ended mysteries in a backstory. Like 5 years ago,
Mm.
my sister wandered out of the house and never came back, and no one knows what happened to her. Give me that in the backstory. I'll go, yeah, I could do something with that. Like open-ended mysteries or things, but people tend to put very, very definitive things in their backstory.
Right.
Entice your DM by giving them intriguing, open-ended things in your backstory, and they will love it. They're much more likely to include that than the fact that you are going to someday inherit the barony of Schmergenbergen. You know, that's just there to make you feel cool, and it's not like a really great story beat.
Yeah,
Anyway, moving.
channel your inner, was it J.J. Abrams with the mystery boxes, right? Give me a good mystery box with your character. That's I think actually better than a backstory.
Gotcha. Anything else you want to say about incorporating PC backstories?
Those were kind of my main three suggestions, right? Is like the use alignment to create a character arc. Give me a single NPC, and then kind of just general guidance of don't overdo it. Keep it simple.
Gotcha. Oh, you just got a preview there. Sneak peek. Brad, can you say the third one again? Why'd you become adventurer? What's the major character conflict? And the third thing?
And then either an NPC or a location. So give me the name of the town that's important to you, or either you're coming from or you're going to, right? Or give me an NPC that's malleable enough for me to, to use. And of course, like I said, that NPC or that place, whenever those are involved in the scene, that's your time to shine. Like, you're in the spotlight when the NPC you created comes on the scene, right? Or when you're visiting that location, that's your time to shine. Talk to me outside of game, give me ideas of, what's going on, when we know we're about to get to your town that you created. Or talk to me about that NPC. Do you want them to be a foil? Do you want them to be a love interest? Do you want them to be an enemy or frenemy? Kind of give me that framework of kind of where you see this character going and how that's going to enhance your character.
100%. So let's move on. Although we don't have a whole lot of the show left, but maybe we'll end early today and give you guys back some of your time. I'm going to a movie in an hour and a half anyway.
Ooh.
Or actually like an hour. Yeah, okay. We definitely need to end on time, so I'm not late. So coming up now is another segment of Jim Explains Daggerheart. Next time I'll have some graphics if I can remember. So, death in Daggerheart. Dun dun dun! Facing death is an important part of being an adventurer, and having a character die can be an exciting end to a story, as well as an opportunity for the player to transition into something new. In Daggerheart, when you mark your last hit point, you must make a death move. And it's important to note that because of the way Daggerheart's initiative works, there's no rounds. So when you mark your last hit point, you make a death move immediately. So you go down, the spotlight stays on you until it is resolved. Next. So there are 3 death moves in the game, and you can make your own. There's nowhere that says you can't make your own. And my video on Sunday, I give an example of a death move that I invented. Okay, so the first death move is called Blaze of Glory. Your character embraces death and goes out in a blaze of glory. Take 1 action at the GM's discretion, which critically succeeds, then cross through the veil of death. Do they refer to other things in moves? Yes. Twin Steel, don't worry. We're going to get to chapter 2. Don't worry. We got plenty of time. Yeah, they refer to everything as moves, the way Powered by the Apocalypse games do. Yeah, so the Blaze of Glory is one-shot energy in a campaign. That one-shot energy when you don't give a crap if your character lives or dies, you just want to do something epic. And so the Blaze of Glory is that. And because Daggerheart is a more narrative game, I think the word critically succeeds there has some leeway, especially if that player is making a big sacrifice. You can let them do something pretty cool. I won't spoil it, but in everybody's seen Critical Role Campaign 3, there was a character death that came from a Blaze of Glory. Even though they were playing 5e, they did a Blaze of Glory. And if you saw it, it was a pretty impactful moment. So... Did Spock do a Blaze of Glory?
Star Trek 2, yeah.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, he went in there. He put the
Yeah,
cap back on. Yeah,
yeah.
Spock totally Blaze of Glory.
Yep, he saved the ship in order to, he sacrificed his life to save the ship. The needs
Yeah. The
of the
needs of the
many,
many.
right, outweigh the needs of the one.
Spock, it's illogical. What are you doing? Okay. So that's the Blaze of Glory. And that's your pretty wild option. Then you have Avoid Death. This is the controversial option. Your character avoids death and faces consequences. They temporarily drop unconscious, and then you work with the GM to describe how the situation worsens. Your character can't move or act while unconscious. And then this next phrase is the most contentious. They can't be targeted by an attack, and they return to consciousness when an ally clears one or more of the marked hit points or when the party finishes a long rest. So, I've seen some discussion online about area of effect spells.
Hmm.
And Daggerheart doesn't have a whole lot of area of effect stuff. Even in AoE, you can tend to choose the targets. There's not a lot of friendly fire possible in Daggerheart. But this one is interesting. So if your character falls unconscious, roll your hope die. If its value is equal to or under your character's level, they gain a scar. I'll show the scar section in a second. But so yeah, this is that. This basically lets you say nope, and just completely remove yourself from the scene. That's how I interpret it. To say that you can't move or act and can't be targeted by an attack, or that you're essentially just as if the player had to leave, so their PC was removed from the scene. It's
Mhm.
basically like an X card for combat to say, I can't die. No, I don't. I don't want to die. But then there is the scar thing. Scar means you. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. Next, risk it all. Roll your duality dice. If the hope die is higher, your character stays on their feet and clears the amount of hit points of stress equal to the value of the hope die. If your fear die is higher, roll up a new character. If you critically succeed, your character stays up and clears all hit points and stress. So this one reduces 5e death saves to one roll. And because of the way crits work, you have a little better than 50% chance of succeeding.
Mhm.
And then scars, and Brad, I'll let you talk. So if you choose to avoid death, you can take a scar. You cross out one of your hope slots, which I really kind of enjoy that narratively. It's like you were almost killed, and so you lose a little bit of your maximum potential to have hope in the world.
Mm.
I kind of narratively like the way that works.
Yeah, that's cool.
Um, Scars are permanent, can be healed at the GM's discretion as a downtime project, reward for a quest focused on healing that scar, or something with similar narrative weight. If you ever cross out your last hope slot, it's time to end your character's journey. And then this note down about resurrection down here. It's possible to resurrect a dead character, although it's often a long, difficult, costly process. There is a level 10 spell called Resurrection, but once you cast it, you roll a d6, and if you roll a 1 through 5, you can never use the spell again.
Ooh, like that.
So, yeah, that's very serious. So, Brad, what do you think about death moves in Daggerheart? Do you have any questions?
I love them. In fact, I stole them back when I saw the original Daggerheart playtest. I stole this idea, and I've been using it in my 5e 5.5 games ever since, and my players love it. Um, the idea that that player who always loves making up multiple characters, uh, they thrive on that blaze of glory. They love that. And then like narratively, there's just some cool times where Blaze of Glory just seems like this is the right option. We're at the end of the campaign, we're up against the dragon, gonna go out in the Blaze of Glory, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Um, so Twin Steel Hope, in Daggerheart, there's no spell slots or superiority dice. Everyone has the same resources of hope, stress, and hit points. So hope is a resource you get to spend on abilities.
yeah, and if Daggerheart ever gets hugely popular, it definitely sounds like internet memery. Lost a hope slot today.
Yeah. And it's funny that the other mechanic in game is called stress. So like to do things, you take on stress, and you can use stress as like if you're trying to persuade the Duke to let you into the ball and you fail, you take a stress because you're like, oh, I don't get in. It's the mechanics and the narrative. There's some fun interaction between some of those things in Daggerheart, I think.
Yeah.
And also, you know what? If you want to make your Daggerheart campaign lethal, just don't allow the avoid death move.
Mhm.
You perfectly fine to say, hey, in my campaign, there's only 2 allowable death moves when you die. You either blaze a glory or you just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah. The scar thing, like the way I adapted that to 5e is you take a -2 to one of your ability scores. So that's how So my players have actually enjoyed that narratively, right? Because there was in one of the campaigns, the paladin took a permanent injury, is what we call it. We the Took a permanent injury to his intelligence twice. So he basically role played his character for the rest of the campaign after having two scars or two permanent injuries to his intelligence. He role played his character as having like post concussion syndrome, right? So he would forget stuff. Whenever he rolled and failed an intelligence check, you know, he would act like dazed and confused, like he was having a flashback from the injury. So my players have definitely used it narratively. One of the players took a permanent injury to their charisma, so that they had a scar on their face for the rest of the adventure. Um,
That's cool.
yeah, so it's the the scars or permanent injury thing has been useful in my campaigns. It's been neat to see what my players have done with it.
Uh, Twin Steel. Yeah. Yeah, there's a cap to hope, and you can increase it when you level up, or some classes get uh increased hope. But yeah, hope you got a 50% chance of generating hope every time you roll the dice, so you get a lot of them, and there's a lot of ways to spend it in the game. One of my favorites is called the tag team. Since there's no initiative and you can go whenever you want in combat, one person spends 3 hope, 2 people team up, decide what they're going to do. They both roll the dice and basically like roll the dice and damage at advantage. 2 people get to do what they call a tag team move, which is pretty cool. Although I think 3 hope might be too much. I might homebrew that down to 2 hope. We'll see how it goes. I can't not tweak the game, Brad.
Oh, I'm laughing at Twin Steel's comment about tag teaming the hope slot.
There you go. I get the idea that you have to name your scar. Yeah, you know what? I think I would homebrew. I didn't do this when I ran it before, because nobody chose the scar option or the avoid death option. But I think I would rule that you automatically get a scar. Instead of having rolling and having going under your level, because you can't just cheat death completely for free.
Right.
That's not right.
Yeah.
You gotta you avoid death. You can go, nope, I'm not gonna die today, not this session. But then you get a permanent. You don't get to be like, maybe I'll get a scar, maybe not. Roll and add in other things to change the dice roll.
But I do think, like, if I was a player and I had used the cheat death option and succeeded, a couple of times, I would role play with that. Like, I would start to role play my character as being a little more nervous, as being a little more
Mm,
anxious because I've cheated death so many times. You know, am I, and start to question, am I a good enough person to keep cheating death? Like, all the bad things I've done, do I deserve to keep cheating death? Right? There's a lot of narrative stuff you could add in there to role play your character
yeah,
if your
you could
character has cheated death more than once, right?
you could go the opposite way and conclude that you must be the luckiest PC in the world, and that you need to seize every day.
Right.
Drink every bottle of rum, live every day to the fullest, because you're the luckiest person in the world.
Yeah.
But you keep
Go
cheating death.
go total Jack Sparrow on it, right?
Exactly. Okay, we're running out of time, and we had to bump a thing Brad wanted to talk about last week. I don't want to bump it again. I got a vamp for just a second, Brad, while I change what I'm sharing here.
Yeah, well, so this thing I ran across, actually, one of my players sent it to me, and I think originally it was Jordan, PH is silent, Jordan, who came up with this idea, or I don't know if he came up with it or he was the one that made a video about it. But I've always been interested in alternative ways for character creation ability scores, right? And so this was an interesting way to have a balanced approach but still roll dice. I thought it was cool.
Okay, why don't you tell us what we're talking about?
So essentially, when you roll up your character, you roll 3 dice. You roll 1d6, 1d8, and 1d10. And then you use these static numbers to add to those dice rolls. So you're only rolling 3 dice total, and it generates all 6 of your stats. But what you do is you take your d6 result and you add 10 to that, and um, you know what? And I think this graphic is wrong because it should be. Is that right? No, I think this. Yeah, I think this is right. So you take your d6 roll and you add 10 to that. You take the same d6 roll, and add it to 15. Is that right? Did I do
Hmm.
this wrong? And then, but the point is, right, is you have these static numbers that you're adding to these individual dice rolls, and that
Hmm.
generates different stats.
Okay.
And so what you do, I think I did that wrong. I think half
Here,
of these
I'll
are
stop
supposed,
sharing it then if the math is wrong.
yeah, I think half of these are supposed to be a subtraction. Like
Oh, okay.
you add your d6 roll to a number, and then you subtract your d6 roll to a number.
So maybe the ones that say 15 should be 15 minus d6.
I think so. Yes.
Gotcha. That makes more
Because that
sense.
would give you, yeah, because that would, you could get a number as low as, if you're subtracting, you get a number as low as 9 there, right?
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
I've
So
only
I thought it was an interesting way to do it, because what it does is it gives like a randomization. So like every player has a different set of numbers, right? But
yeah.
the total value is the same, right? Because you're taking the
Hmm.
same d6 roll and adding it to a number, and then also subtracting it from a number. And then you're
Huh.
taking the same d8 roll, adding it to one number and subtracting it from the number. Taking
Right.
the same d10 roll, right? So by so the total is always going to add up to 75.
Huh.
Um, but it's still randomly generated. I just thought it was an interesting way to roll up stats. I thought it was cool.
And
Clearly, I screwed up on the graphic.
that's called 3 up, 3 down.
Yeah, that's what Jordan called it. He called it 3 up, 3 down.
Yeah, we
Uh,
think that might have come from Jorfton.
yeah,
Um,
I know the video I watched where he explained it was from Jordan. I don't know if he came up with it originally or he just found it somewhere
okay,
and created a video about it. Yeah.
copy that. Hey, Twin Steel, are you talking about the death moves segment? Yeah, I've got a video coming out about that on Sunday. Um,
Jordan's Twin Seal's asking what Jordan's channel name is. It's oh, what is it?
well, his channel is just called Jorfton, but
Is
he's
it?
also got Jorfton's Jocular Junction, which is a separate channel for his podcast.
Gotcha.
Which I
I
don't think
thought
he. I think I'm subscribed to that, but he hasn't put out an episode in a long time. Maybe I think I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to it. Well, while Brad's looking that up, there was one thing I skipped over because I wanted to make sure we had time to talk about 3 up, 3 down. But this is okay. Let me click over here. So, PaizoCon 2025 wrapped up, and the only reason I don't know anything about PaizoCon, but the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because of this text right here. So they're summarizing Pathfinder Hellfire Crisis. After Gorham's death in the God's Reign, various factions are trying to gather up the shards of mythic power called War Shards. This includes Abrograil Thrune, the head of Cheliax, who sends out Hellmites to find and take the War Shard held by the Hellbreakers League. Andurin sends a general who is captured, accused of espionage, and executed, which drags them into war on the side of the Hellbreakers League. The reason why I read you all that is to remind you that nobody cares about your D&D character. I'm sorry, I know that's mean, but I read that and every other word is capitalized and I don't know what any of it means. And that's how I feel when you tell me about your D&D campaign. You're muted, Brad. Hold on.
there we go. There we go. I've mentioned that my two oldest children play D&D, and of course they always want to tell me about the campaigns that they're in.
Sure.
And they figure, well, Dad must love this because he's the one that taught us how to play this game. And I do my best to listen, but it's hard. Like it's hard to pay attention to somebody else explain their D&D game, explain their campaign experience.
I know you're like, wait. So the wizard opened the third sigil, but not the fourth sigil? No, Dad, he opened the fourth and fifth sigils. I told you already. Or wait, no. The wizard. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but yeah, it's. I mean, one of the coolest experiences you'll have is being like running into somebody that you used to game with years later and be able to talk about the campaign that you played together because you both remember it, you both know the context, you know the characters, and it's so cool. It's like it really it feels like you're reminiscing about a real memory, right? When you're sharing those stories with somebody that you actually played the game with, right? But it's like it's not nearly the same when you're like, okay, you play D&D, cool.
If you do need to tell someone a story about your D&D campaign, stick to the plot and leave out the lore. Stick to the plot, leave out the lore. Oh, so this looks like this is here with corrected math.
Yeah.
Twin Studio asked about putting up Brad's thing was a separate video, the 3 up 3 down. I think because the graphic was wrong, Brad probably wouldn't want us to put that out as like a separate video where he's demoing the math incorrectly. We're not going to fix that in post. That's going to stay.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, so you add the roll to a static number and you subtract that same roll from a static number. And that's where you get the variability, right? And the key here is that you're using the same D6 roll, the same D8 roll, and the same D10 roll to both add and subtract. That's what creates the balance, and that's how you make sure that every player character has the same total number if they were to add up all their stats. But it randomly generates stats.
Very cool. Yeah, I like this. I am all about until they finally kill the 1 to 20 stats in games. I'm all about interesting ways. Next week, I think this week I was reading Beast Feast because I was maybe gonna run it for Brad and some other people. We're gonna run something else, but Beast Feast, the cooking mechanics are really cool. Maybe I'll go into more detail next week, but it's like you get to roll a huge pile of dice. So you kill monsters, you accumulate ingredients, and ingredients are dice. And then you roll this massive pile of dice and you look for matching numbers, and then you pull matching numbers out until you have all numbers matching, and that determines the dish you can make. Very elaborate, interesting cooking mechanics, like much more. But the campaign, like that's what it's about. You fight monsters, you cook them. You fight monsters, you cook them. That's basically all you do.
Yeah, I mean, so that's your perfect opportunity to play Delicious in Dungeon, right? Like it's
Yeah.
yeah.
If you
The other thing too is I think you could use that same frame if you wanted to, like you could take out this like this pots and pans and spatulas part, and you could but use the other components of that frame to do like a Witcher style thing. Right.
Sure. I mean, the pots and pans and spatula is just because it's in the frame. It says you're an adventurer from this town. The idea being that you'll care about saving the town, but you could absolutely be from somewhere else with regular weapons. There's no.
But you can still use the monster harvesting mechanics to do some
Right.
sort of. So you could take it in a different direction and use the mechanics to make it more of like a Witcher or like some sort of other monster harvesting thing that's a little more sinister of like you're becoming the monster as you feed on the monsters that you kill.
Nice. I like that. Well, we are about out of time. I'm afraid we're not going to get to chapter 2 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. We will definitely get to that. It's because Ryan wasn't here. Our rhythm was off, so we just didn't have time to get. Next week, though, when we're all here, we'll be better at Dungeons and Dragons and Diner and Drivers. I saw that like on a T-shirt or something somewhere. I think. Yeah. Sorry, Dungeon Master's Guide. We'll get back to it. You know, it's coming. Anyway, so that's about it for us, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. And next time we see you, it'll be June.
It's crazy. This year's flying by.
Really is flying by. Anyway, go back and watch from the start. Make sure you open it on several different browser windows because we need all the clicks and the view time. That yummy, yummy view time. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.